Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hugo Castro. I'm the chair of the Miami-Dade Beacon Council, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our second 2020 Vision, Reimagining Recovery for Miami-Dade Roundtable. As Florida enters phase 3 of the recovery, many professionals and their kids are still working from home or just starting to venture back into the classrooms and offices. Federal, state, and local resources continue to provide vital support to industries, businesses, and individuals in our community, as this crisis has shown us both our strengths and where we need to do better. At the Miami-Dade Beacon Council, our commitment to the strength and prosperity of Miami-Dade's local economy has never been stronger, as support for local businesses has taken center stage this year. This is especially true for smaller Black minority-owned businesses, where programs like the Business Recovery Partners are bringing together dozens of local organizations to provide one-to-one help to local businesses and local owners with everything from growth and marketing to applying for funding via the RISE Miami-Dade, Career Sources Layoff Aversion Fund, and many other resources. Initiatives like MiamiTech.works, the online portal recently launched by our Tech and Innovation Committee, is highlighting not only local tech jobs that are actually available, but free workshops and career coaching for displaced individuals that are interested in upskilling or reskilling to explore opportunities in the technology sector. Additionally, the team has continued to actively engage and recruit companies relocating to Miami-Dade. This work is essential as it brings much needed jobs and investment into our community. Now in our 35th year, the Beacon Council's dedicated efforts have generated more than $6.7 billion in direct capital investments and has brought over 100,000 combined jobs to Miami-Dade. Our goal for today is to provide a forum for the business community to speak to what they think is an inclusive recovery and what that will look like, what actions, resources, and support are needed to make it successful. We have an incredible panel of local leaders this afternoon, and we're truly grateful that they have made time to join us. I want to start by recognizing our corporate sponsor, Baptist Health South Florida. We thank you for your support and thank all the doctors, researchers, and frontline workers that have been working nonstop to take care of our community and keep us safe. We'd also like to thank our media partners, WLRN, Public Radio and Television, and the Miami Herald. We are lucky to have WLRN's VP of News, Special Correspondent Tom Hudson, who will moderate today's panel discussion and includes the following elite lineup: the Miami-Dade Public Schools Superintendent Alberto Carvalho, Teri Williams, President and CEO of OneUnited Bank, Dr. Marcos Mestre, Senior Medical Director, Pediatric Services of Children's Nicklaus Hospital, Al Dotson, Managing Partner of Bilzin Sumberg, Melissa Krinzman, Managing Partner of Krillion Ventures, and Philippe St. Just, Co-Founder and SVP of REEF Technologies. Before we hand it off to Tom, to invite President and CEO of the Beacon Council to help set the stage by sharing the recovery on the way. Mike?
Thanks, Hugo, and thanks everyone for participating this afternoon. The panelists, just amazing. I just appreciate everything that, and having all of you here, given all the challenges that we have in front of us. You know, as we think about this idea of a 2020 vision and reimagining the recovery, we need to take a look at this community-wide strategy that was put in place just about 10 years ago called One Community, One Goal. You know, it was a strategy about how Miami-Dade could enjoy long-term economic prosperity for, you know, all of our citizenry and our businesses in ways that historically had been difficult to achieve. And that strategy, as we start to move into this recovery, clearly requires a little bit of rethinking. We need to do things differently. Technology is even driving us to do things differently. And we've undertaken a number of initiatives in partnership with more than 40 other organizations in this community as a way of beginning that process. Those partnerships start with Miami-Dade County and the Mayor's Office and the County Commission. Organizations like the Greater Miami Convention Visitors Bureau, the Coalition of Chambers, organizations like Profera, and our academic institutions, the universities, the college, and of course, the K through 12 system. And those partnerships become important as we start to rethink what our future looks like under the One Community, One Goal umbrella. Just to highlight a couple of things that are underway right now that really are steering us in this new direction. We launched a program called Miami Community Ventures. That program is all about helping some of our most economically distressed residents gain access to living wage jobs. And that's not happening in a lot of communities around the United States, but it's happening here in Miami-Dade. Project Opioid, a new project that we've undertaken in partnership with Florida Blue, the United Way of Miami-Dade, and even our partners in Broward and Palm Beach counties, the other economic development organizations, in order to begin to have impact on one of the more serious challenges that we have in our community, and that being opioid addiction. There's also the South Florida Anchor Alliance. This is being led by the Health Foundation of South Florida in partnership with our schools, our hospitals, our universities, government. And it's an effort to really help small and disadvantaged businesses gain access to contracting opportunities through those large anchor institutions. And so compliments to the South Florida Anchor Alliance, and we're really pleased to be a partner in helping move that initiative forward. And then there's this small business accelerator partnership that we formed. And that effort is intended to bring together all the different small business support organizations that we have in the community in a way that we've never been able to come together before. And the idea is to help our small businesses gain access to the plethora of resources that have surfaced during this whole pandemic process, so that they have equal opportunity to tap into those resources just as large established businesses will. And I can tell you from our experiences working with literally hundreds of companies over the past few months, it's extremely difficult for our small businesses to gain access unless we provide them with the kind of concierge support that's needed in order to pull it off. And again, we've got some 40 plus organizations working with us on all of these initiatives. And those are just a sampling of some of the things that we have underway. And then lastly, I don't want to leave out our academic institutions in the K through 12 system, because they're critically important to our ability to provide the pipeline of talent that's going to be needed for our businesses as we start to recover. A couple of examples. At FIU, they have a construction trades group that operates out of the engineering school that's helping to provide a lot of the construction trades talent that's needed in order to build all the buildings and other facilities that we see going up around our community. And what's really nice about their effort, they're partnered with Lennar, one of the largest home builders in the United States, in helping to train returning citizens so they have an opportunity to gain access to high-paying living wage jobs. The other one is the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center at FIU, that's partnering with us on our Small Business Accelerator initiative. And then most recently, we've begun putting together a couple of pre-apprenticeship programs in customer service and in automotive trades in partnership with Florida Blue, a couple automotive dealerships, and of course, Career Source South Florida, as a way of really helping some of our individuals that are looking to pivot into upskilling and reskilling in order to ensure that they have opportunities, given a lot of things has changed in our community over the past several months. So a lot going on right now, but the idea of reimagining where we are is something that we know we need to do. And our intent is to utilize the One Community, One Goal platform as the primary vehicle for making that happen. And we look forward to partnering with all of you in order to pull that off. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Tom Hudson. He's the Vice President of News and Special Correspondent for WLRN. Tom also hosts and produces The Sun Economy, which takes a fresh look at topics as diverse as healthcare investments, storm preparedness, international trade, real estate and technology, startup activity within the technology space. Tom anchors the Florida Roundup in addition to leading the organization's news engagement strategy. Thank you, Tom, for being with us here today and for moderating this panel. Tom, I turn it over to you.
Mike, it's always a pleasure to spend some time with the Beacon Council, its members, and the associated stakeholders. Thank you very much for allowing me and WLRN the opportunity to help moderate this really important conversation. And it truly is, as we know, that the phase 3 reopening for the state of Florida is less than a week old. The governor announcing it just on Friday. Lots of confusion, of course, greeted that announcement here locally. But let's take a look at kind of where we're at with the Miami-Dade economy. August unemployment stood at 8.1%, certainly very high, but below where it was just a month earlier in July at 14.5%. So we are seeing some pretty fast improvement there. However, there are 76,000 fewer jobs in Dade County today than there were a year ago. Hotel occupancy is down 45% year over year. Air travel is still very quiet at Miami International Airport. And of course, the cruise lines remain docked. Trade is also seeing some double-digit year-over-year drops at both Port Miami and Miami International. Home sales, real estate, actually residential real estate has been a bright spot here throughout the pandemic. Home sales are up 6.4% year-over-year, driven by single-family homes. Those condominium residents are looking maybe for a backyard during the pandemic. And we are seeing more and more questions being built up in the commercial real estate space as questions around the longevity of restaurants, bars, retail, and hotels are still floating around in this local market. So that's kind of the economic stats. Meantime, we've got the Miami Heat in the finals tonight. The Miami Marlins, for the first time since 2003, playing in a Major League Baseball playoff game, best-of-3 series with the Chicago Cubs just underway. So those are a couple of things to look forward to. Maybe not economic, but can help our psyche here. And all of this happening as, for those of us who are parents, looking forward to the return to the schoolhouse. And Superintendent Carvalho is with us. And I know, Superintendent, your time is tight with us here during our panel until about 2:30. So I want to start with you, sir. Just yesterday, of course, the school board voted to amend its reopening plan, a phased return for students beginning on Monday through Friday. By Friday of next week, October 9th, all of those students who chose to go back in the schoolhouse will be back in the schoolhouse. Will all public school buildings have the protocols in place by Monday, October 5th, Superintendent?
Thanks for the question, Tom, and great to see everyone, particularly Michael. Thank you for putting together this very important conversation. That is certainly our goal, Tom, as I briefed the board yesterday as we reestablished the starting time for the schoolhouse model, as you correctly said. We're beginning at October 5th, but in a staggered way, first with the most fragile and youngest of children, so students with severe disabilities in pre-K, K, and first grade, and then progressively bringing the other grades in to have full completion of a return to students to schools by the 9th. Certainly that is our goal. We have still 4 days ahead of us to finalize some preparations. All schools are at a high level of readiness, with the exception of some schools that we have that were built as bunkers. So they have no windows. These are windowless schools. We've tried very hard and continue to work on solutions. Obviously, not enough time to break windows into those buildings. So we are exploring additional solutions that we hope to deploy prior to this weekend. If we are able in deploying those solutions, which is increased ventilation, ionization devices, et cetera, then we will open those buildings as well. But we're talking about a very, very small minority of the 400 plus school inventory in Miami-Dade.
So some of those school buildings that you describe as bunkers may not reopen for students next week?
Should we not be able to, between now and Sunday, install the mitigation strategies that I just described, then I'll have to make a decision. Obviously, my decision is going to be one that follows health guidelines and protects our workforce and our students.
We should let our folks know to please submit any questions that you have in the Q&A tab of the Zoom webinar here, and we'll get to those just as fast as possible. Will masks be mandatory in classrooms and on school buses and on school grounds?
I'm glad you asked me that question, because it seems that at least in the state of Florida and in other expanded circles, the wearing of masks, which is the most protective, defensive equipment one can use during this pandemic, is being questioned, in some cases, sadly discouraged. So regardless of the guidance that some are providing, masks will be mandatory in all school buses. They will be mandatory in all schools, no exceptions other than those that are medically endorsed. So there may be some employees or children that may have a condition, a respiratory condition, or a disability that may make it impossible for them to wear a mask. And then we have additional strategies. But yes, every single student getting on a bus will have to disinfect their hands. There are these dispensers in the buses. We'll have to wear the mask. Social distancing in a bus, social distancing in classrooms. Obviously, at least the international standard of 1 meter, 3 feet, 3 inches. In the cafeterias, in schools where students will be eating in the cafeteria, staggered lunches, and the social distancing there is 6 feet, because obviously they have to remove their masks. And of course, increased sanitization cycles, mandatory hand washing cycles for all, and a new application that every employee needs to log on to and declare their viability to return to work that day on the basis of symptoms, as well as infrared thermometers for every family in Miami-Dade.
Infrared thermometers for every family in Miami-Dade. That's over 300,000, 400,000 infrared thermometers?
350,000 children. Obviously, many of them are siblings.
Right.
We're talking about roughly 200,000 IR thermometers. These were obtained with CARES money, actually via partnership with Miami-Dade County, that we were able to buy these thermometers. Also, with CARES money, we are able to provide a nurse or a medical technician to every single school, which was a luxury that shouldn't be. That didn't happen prior to that funding arriving. Obviously, that's a necessity since we have to establish isolation rooms in schools for the eventuality that a child or an employee may develop symptoms after arriving at school.
Are teachers and students who may become infected required to alert the school district about that positive test?
That is correct. Number one, that is the morally right thing to do, but it is also a requirement of ours. And there are a number of reasons for that. Obviously, we have an interest in containing the spreading of the infection. So contact tracing, the investigation of points of contact between the student or the employee are critical in as narrow a time period as possible to identify those individuals, provide notification, and then enact the protocols for quarantining, isolation of certain areas of the school, deep disinfection, electrostatic disinfection, but also external communication to relatives as well as siblings of children who may be in one school but have siblings attending other schools who are obviously providing contact. So it's a complex contact tracing process, and the declaration of being infected, symptomatic or not, needs to be as swift as possible for us to pull the triggers on contact tracing and appropriate information, including notification to the health department.
If folks want to submit a question or a comment, we do have the Q&A panel open, so please submit those comments there. Dr. Mestre, let me bring you into the conversation here as you have heard the superintendent describe the back to school protocols. What kind of position is the community in with the virus and the spread of the virus for some students and teachers to go back to the public classrooms beginning on Monday?
I think we've done a great job as a community in terms of getting our infection rate down to where it needs to be. We were shooting for under 5% over a period of 2 weeks, and we've gotten there through the great work that all the healthcare providers in the community and the members of the community wearing their masks, doing the social distancing, making sure to wash their hands. So I think at this point, it is prudent to return to the schools as long as, and Superintendent Carvalho has done an excellent job in terms of mentioning the measures that they've taken at the schools. And as long as those measures are adhered to and members of the community do the right thing, if they're exposed, if they have a positive test, to not return to school. And we emphasize to parents, this is not the time to send a child to school when they're sick. Even if you don't have a positive test and you're still sick, please get evaluated. And that's the message we want to get out to the community. And with virtual learning that's capable of, so the child does not miss any material, we emphasize that to the families and make sure that that's adhered to.
Some questions coming in, Mr. Superintendent Carvalho, and while our time with you is limited, I think it would be of value to put these for some clarity's sake for our Beacon Council folks. Will children have orientation and verbal instructions on how to stay safe and stay socially distanced on playgrounds and hallways?
Absolutely. So we've published quite a bit of information through our reopening plan and our introduction to the new school year prior to August 31st. We disseminated it in 3 languages, obviously in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole to all parents in an age-appropriate way. But in light of the fact that we are actually returning to physical schooling, we are preparing an easy to read, to understand, frequently asked questions and guidance to parents, because quite frankly, we will be in a better position in school if parents begin a dialogue with their children about expected behaviors. So the washing your hands, not congregating too closely, maintaining distance, wearing your mask, that is a function and responsibility that parents can help us a great deal with. So yes, that will happen. The other thing I would like to add, consistent with what Dr. Mestre said, is that look, we ventured into a return to schools guided by scientific principles, guided by some of the sharpest medical and public health minds in our community. A former Surgeon General of the United States of America, the head of pediatrics for the University of Miami, a top epidemiologist from FIU, and many others. And we developed gating criteria. Every one of those elements specified in that the gating criteria have been met, including some of those that Dr. Mestre alluded to: lower positivity rate over a certain period of time, below 10%, shooting for 5, ultimately 3, lower mortality, morbidity, ICU bed capacity is stable.
What about that 48-hour turnaround for test results? That was an important part too.
That is an important part, much improved. So the vast majority, I think the county is up based on the last dashboard, and upwards of 80% of the tests are being delivered within 48 hours. We're not at 100% yet, but I think the remaining tests are coming in within 72 hours, so it's not a long delay. But we're very encouraged by the recent announcement by the administration and my recent conversations with the governor regarding the 150 million rapid tests are going to be distributed to the states. I can tell you that in the state of Florida, the governor has made a commitment that school districts will be some of the recipients of those. We need them. That's one of the ways of rapidly identifying whether a symptom is a threat or not, because as we return to school, a sneeze is no longer just going to be a sneeze, right?
Yeah, right. This is the antibody tests that the governor announced. Dr. Mestre, some of those tests have a history of a pretty high false negative rate, which will require further testing, correct? So I guess, is there a caution here that goes along with the deployment of these tests?
Most definitely. And if there isn't, for example, an exposure that you have to somebody who's positive, testing too early can lead to a false negative, meaning that you will not have enough of a viral load to detect that the virus is present. And I always adhere to more so the symptoms that an individual is having. If somebody's having fever, cough, even though their test might be negative, it's not the time for them to return to school immediately, but more so wait for the abatement of symptoms at that time.
A couple more questions, Mr. Superintendent, before your time is gone. Will COVID tests be conducted in the schools weekly?
So no, that was not a recommendation from our medical expert panel, and we did not prepare for that. What we will have, obviously, is depending on symptoms, we will have testing available in our isolation rooms once those rapid tests arrive. We are providing we will be providing testing for employees at 3 specific locations. So I'm reading the question chat, and if you want me to take on a couple of those directly in rapid fire, I may.
Sure, go ahead. Just announce the question though, so folks know what the question is.
So there's a question about whether or not virtual school will continue to be available, and for how long. So yes, based on our plan, the My School Online will remain viable beyond the return of students to the school, those students whose parents elected for physical schooling. And that's a guarantee.
Do you know for how long, though? If the schools go into phase 3, that plan was everybody's back in the classroom.
Right. Everybody's back in the classroom, but we will continue the virtual option open to parents should they choose to do so. We made that decision. We announced it a number of times, including at last night's board meeting. We do have a sense, however, that when that time comes, we believe that vast majority of children will return to school, but the option will still be in place, even in phase 3, for students to take advantage of MSO, My School Online.
Someone asking also, Mr. Superintendent, supply of masks at school. Will students be given masks at school, or teachers for that matter?
So we have ample stock by the exceeding millions of PPE, whether we're talking about masks, gloves, etc. We obviously, anyone who shows up at the school, if it's an employee or a child who does not have a mask, we're ready to provide a mask to that person. Obviously, we're encouraging people to bring their own masks, but anyone who arrives at the school does not have a mask or whose mask gets damaged or dirty, we have ample supply to replace it, no questions asked.
A question about class sizes and maintaining social distancing of 6 feet.
Right, so the decision that's been made, and this is based on guidance from a number of entities, including the World Health Organization, within the classroom, as long as masks are worn, the class distancing, social distancing will be 1 meter, 3 feet, 3 inches. Obviously in spaces, in areas, even non-traditional spaces where that can be extended, that would be encouraged. But it will be difficult, and we've acknowledged that time and time again, not only us, but across the state of Florida and the country. It will be virtually impossible to guarantee 6 feet of distance. However, physical exercise, the practice of band, for example, outdoors only with a great deal of social distancing, because the practicing of band or choral performances can turn into super spreading events. So they're going to be done with extra caution. Cafeteria, however, the social distancing is going to be no less than 6 feet, because kids will have to take off their masks to eat, obviously.
Yeah.
We have sealed off the water fountains and transformed them into, water filling stations, and we have water bottles for all the kids that may want, bottled water, since obviously drinking from the fountain would not be prudent at this point.
Speaking to the Beacon Council here, of course, business development, economic development, jobs, employment, economic opportunities is so key. So let's talk about a financial question before we bring in the rest of the group here, Mr. Superintendent, because I know your time is tight. Does the phased return of students on October 5th now, does that guarantee that the school district will collect all of the state funding that it is budgeted for?
That is my prayer. So we are operating right now under a very important hold harmless provided by the state via an emergency order that basically guarantees 2 essential elements. First is that we are being funded currently at the projected enrollment, not actual enrollment. I don't need to tell you, across the state of Florida, massive loss of FTE, particularly at the younger grades. There's a question nationally even, where have the kindergartners gone? They have not enrolled. We began to see this week actually a spike in kindergarten enrollment, but it's still far below what it used to be. So in Miami-Dade, we're 7,000 students below the projection, Broward 8,000, Palm Beach the same. But that is not financially harming the system because of that hold harmless. We're getting funded as if those students had arrived on the basis of projection. That's critically important in terms of stabilizing our workforce. Otherwise, we would add significantly to the unemployment data. The other element is, obviously, we're operating a system right now where every single kid is learning online. As of Monday, that will shift. 50% of the students will pivot back into the classroom. 50% will remain online based on their parents' choice. The way the state funds education is not equally at the same level of funding for online virtual education as would be for face-to-face education. And
it's less money if the student is an online student,
right,
as opposed to in the schoolhouse.
Right. The difference is around $2,600 per student. So if those 2 elements were to disappear, let's begin with the first one, it would be a $32 million hit in terms of FTE loss for the first half. If it's annualized, $62, $63 million. if the state were to back away from fully funding at the same FTE value as a physical student for online students, that could have an impact in the neighborhood of $200 to $300 million. So it would be dramatic, to say the least. And that's why we're working with our partners in Tallahassee to continue those hold harmless provisions for the time being.
What kind of timeline do those hold harmless provisions have currently? It's through an executive order, I believe, correct?
It was through an emergency order and prompted by the governor's executive order. Then the commissioner subsequently published an emergency order. The guarantee was first through the February through the October FTE, which will be coming to very soon.
Right.
I keep hearing conversation about extension through the February FTE, and that will provide us, quite frankly, stability for the rest of the year, since education is funded on the basis of 2 counts, one in October and one in February.
Right. Mr. Superintendent, thank you for your time. And to the rest of the panelists, thank you for the ability to ask and concentrate on the superintendent and schools, as it's such an important part in our underlying economy here, as Mike mentioned, certainly in his opening statement. Dr. Mestre, let me kind of bring this back to you here about as we enter into flu season, as we enter into, the potential of another wave, what kind of preparations should the school district, but more importantly, business owners and operators be thinking about today?
Well, I think as Superintendent Carvalho said, in terms of what the preparation they've already done, making sure that there is appropriate signage for the separation of individuals, especially in businesses. If it's possible to do as much as possible outside. Luckily, we're here in Florida. We have the climate that allows to do that, especially in the fall and winter time where it's not as hot as other areas in the summertime. And then in terms of making sure that everybody's washing their hands and telling employees and students and whatnot, what I mentioned before, if you're sick, do not take the chance and come in. Make sure that those individuals stay home if they get tested. That would be even better, and the availability of testing in the area is going to be most important in terms of being able to offer that, and with the capabilities that the state is offering to the individuals, and especially the schools, to have more testing available. I think that's going to be a great benefit.
So as we are officially in phase 3, this is the second conversation that the Beacon Council has hosted about reimagining recovery for Miami-Dade. Dr. Mestre, I'm guessing you are in your office with your diplomas behind you. Right. This is not a real loft brick wall that I'm sitting in front of. I'm from the home office. Teri, I don't know, you got a nice plant there. You could be in your home office. You could be in the bank office. Al, I'm guessing you're in the office. Melissa, you may be at home. Philippe, you may be in the office or maybe at home. So for any of you, are any of you back in the office full-time, part-time? What's the message? Teri, I'll start with you. To the employees, are they back in the office?
Yep. So we are actually an essential business, and we have been open the entire time. So I have been coming to the office every day since COVID. And part of the reason I come, because I can do some work from home, is really to inspire our employees who do have to come into the office. And it has been a journey. So we've seen, both the changes when Miami has been more closed, and we're now seeing a change when Miami and Florida are open. But so I am in the office, and I actually have a couple of thoughts as it relates to being in the office in this new environment. Our customers have actually doubled since the pandemic.
What does that mean? By walk-in customers into the branch?
Both walk-in customers into the branch as well as online. Our total customer base has doubled since March.
And that would mean deposits have increased, yes? Or
deposits have increased, home loan applications have increased. So we are actually experiencing a surge since the pandemic. It was a surprise to us. We have had to hire. Our actual employees in our Miami office have doubled. And so it's a
So you're
very,
pushing against that 76,000 fewer jobs year
yes,
over year. Yeah.
yes, yes. And we have had a very good opportunity to hire in this environment, but it's recently become a little more difficult, surprisingly. We're not sure why, and this is literally in the past couple of weeks. We're not sure why, but we're still hiring, and we're finding that we're getting fewer applications.
Okay.
We're also, and I don't want to take up all the time, but we're also, I guess, happy about the school openings because it allows some people to go back to work, but it also creates a different kind of stress on businesses. Because now what we have is the concern of the virus spreading through kids to homes, to our employees. And that's something that, we haven't had to worry about with schools closed.
Yeah.
So, one of the things about this environment and this pandemic is that we're all connected in a way that we haven't been in the past. And so I'm just,
Yeah. Melissa, how about for you? What's the work from home status for you and some of the portfolio companies you work with?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Yeah.
Great. So interestingly, I've survived 2000 and 2008, living in New York City when the venture market crashed in both of those cities. So I took swift action, if you will, and met with my business partner, Jeffrey Miller, and sat down and said, okay, I'd like to cut back immediately on all overhead because we don't know what it's going to look like in regard to investments or when we're going to want to start making investments. We're going to need to focus on our current portfolio and really make sure that we take care of them first before we continue to look at new investments. So actually we gave up our office space and I decided to work out of the house. So this is my home office. I need to decorate. Basically started a process that I had been through before, which is first you circle the wagons on your current investments and make sure everybody's taken care of. And then you start to look at how you can be helpful to others, which I'll talk about later. And then you figure out what's next. And so I've been doing a lot of focus on what's next. And one of the things I'll just share is some of the research, if you want to hear, that I've done on the space, because I wanted to know if our seed stage deal flow at the beginning of COVID was tracking the same trends as everybody else. So in April, May, and June, we did have a significant drop off in investment opportunities, which I refer to as kind of the deer caught in headlights or COVID headlights. And then I looked at Crunchbase, which we use, that's our Bible. And basically it's the leading database for industry trends and investment insights across the startup landscape. And what I was seeing was that during the same 6-month time period in 2019 to 2020, Crunchbase showed a 36% decline in the number of seed stage investments. And it was due in large part to venture capital investment spending their time, just what I was saying, circling the wagons around their current portfolio companies, determining which companies they wanted to continue to invest in, right, and revising their current investment thesis as a result of the impact both now and in the future of COVID. So that was the first thing we did. I mean, I can tell you a couple of the other pieces that we did immediately, but that was one of them.
I guess the question now is, Melissa, is as you look forward, right? So you have this data on kind of where we were. What is that? How is that informing you about the fourth quarter, but perhaps more importantly, the first half of 21?
So let me parallel that to what's going on with Miami Angels, because I think they're a leading indicator of what's happening here. I happen to be on the board and spoke with Rebecca Donta, who leads the organization recently. And she basically was saying that it's been the most active year that they've had so far, with 100% of membership renewals, which I find amazing. She basically said that Miami Angels has invested over $2.3 million in 9 new deals and 5 follow-ons since COVID, or at least through the year, but active since COVID as well. They found that there's more engagement with their members via Zoom, because it's so much easier for everyone to join Zoom than to, have to deal with traffic after work and parking. we were basically, they're finding that they're enjoying the connections with individuals that are like-minded and want to do deals. So the community part has become more important. She said that basically what they're seeing is the biggest interest is ed tech, logistics, digital health, medical devices for non-elective procedures, and home improvement.
Interesting.
And those are some of the trends we're looking at too, because we are looking at readjusting where we're focusing our time and energy as well.
Yeah, arguably that last one could be a result of staying at home and self-quarantining, so to speak. Al Dotson, how about your book of business? And it looks like you are in the Brickell area by the looks of your background there. You're back in the office. Tell us about what your book of business tells you about the state of our recovery.
Well, a couple of things I want to point to. I want to go back to the conversation about the schools and then circle back to the answer to your question, because I think that in reimagining the path forward and listening to the superintendent, it seems like there's an opportunity to incorporate some of the lessons learned regarding distance learning as we move forward, and using some of the technology that he talked about, so that students who aren't actually in school for one reason or another can still participate in classroom learning. I share that in the context of what we're seeing here in our business. And that is, we know that people still want the human interaction and still need that, and will find their way back to our office. I am in the offices, as you point out, and we're seeing more and more people in our firm come back to our office. Like Teri, the law firms were considered essential businesses. That's probably the last time in the history of man that will be considered essential, but we'll take it. So we never really did close. But what we learned is that the efficiency of human interaction that technology provides should not be a lesson lost on us during this moment. So as we look forward to 2021, as a firm, yes, people will be coming back in the office, but the way in which we interact with our clients may be different. It may be similar to the way in which we interact now. Too often prior to COVID-19, our interaction was over the phone, even though we had the technology to do video calls, right? But you gain so much more by being able to see the person, even if you're not in their presence. So we expect that to become a part of the way we operate moving forward. Second, I think Teri's comment about how connected we are, while she said that as almost as an aside, if you tie that to Michael's statement about one community, one goal, we absolutely realize how much we rely on each other more than we thought we did, and how much more we must continue to rely on each other's personal responsibility and our respect of each other in the way in which we interact, whether it's wearing our mask, the social distancing, et cetera. Lastly, I'll share from a business standpoint, we continue to see commercial transactions moving forward. Our clients are looking for value and opportunities that this moment is creating. And there continues to be interest from outside of Florida, connection to investing in Florida and in South Florida, whether it is within the United States or outside of our borders. So that is continuing.
Al, that nature of that investment, is it the traditional looking for real estate in South Florida, or is it manifesting in different types of investment assets?
The answer to that is yes. It is both. It is both. You're seeing the continued focus on adaptive reuse of existing facilities. As facilities become vacant, how might they be used differently? And so that investment is, we're seeing that investment continue both from within South Florida and outside of South Florida.
What are you experiencing in terms of valuations of particularly in commercial real estate? Melissa mentioned they gave up their office space. Are your clients looking for value? Are they seeing prices soften?
Well, that's an interesting question because there's two schools of thought that are operating in parallel at this moment. There are some who are going to maintain their space and believe they need even more in order to bring their employees back to the office in a socially distanced way. So that conversation for sure is taking place by some of our clients and in some of the buildings in which we have offices and clients. And then you have those who recognize that you don't need as much space because they're going to continue to use the remote working platform in order to service their clients. Look, before this all started, I'm sure many of us sat in our offices and said, this can't be done from home. We all must be in the office. And now we realize there's so much more that we can do when we're working remotely, so long as we remain focused on our key mission as a company. And that's what's taking place.
Al, your comment about relying on each other earlier really struck a chord, and I want to bring Philippe into the conversation here because as the business concentration of REEF Technologies has pivoted, I would say, Philippe, from your perspective, that reliance on each other really has been kind of a new focus for REEF Technologies. Tell us a little bit about kind of the kind of where your book of business is, what that tells you about the economic recovery here in this region.
Sure. And I'd like to start off by thanking the council for having me on and for the panelists. But I'll just expand a little bit on what Al was mentioning with, we've seen a large number of businesses that have started to understand that working from home and working remotely is something that is valuable and something that will stay. And so I think as the months progress and even beyond COVID, we're getting into a world that is going to be much more dispersed, but also much more local. As people stay home, and as people work in their neighborhoods, they're much more interested in getting goods and services within their area, rather than having to commute an hour to work and come back. And so the richness of these neighborhoods is something that is going to expand and that people are looking for. And to some extent, that aligns very closely with the vision that we have for REEF. And we were in I think a very good position from a mission and vision perspective to be able to look at those trends developing even before COVID and adapt to them and help drive them forward. So specifically for those who might not be familiar with my company, we basically bring curated goods, services, and experiences to people by transforming underutilized urban space into neighborhood hubs. And specifically right now, that means essential services such as COVID-related healthcare and building what is now called the 15-minute neighborhood. So that's the idea that as you spend more time at home, as you start working at home, as your work world and your home world start colliding, you want to live in a richer environment. And so the 15-minute city is the idea that you have those experiences and those goods and services close to you, around you, so that you can get them quickly, and so that you can, again, not have to travel far away. And so from a healthcare perspective, we were able to partner with healthcare companies, lab providers, to bring COVID testing into neighborhoods. And we have a partnership with a company called Carbon Health, for example, that uses our adaptable facilities to come into underutilized neighborhoods to deliver COVID testing right now, which is going to keep on going for the next few months. And at some point, it's probably going to transform into vaccinations, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And
then you've also got another piece that works on kitchens and is looking at the delivery of food and feeding those who may be going without.
That's right. So it's the same concept of basically bringing in these goods and services, but now applied to a different set of partners that we work with, and essentially it is bringing food options to people who might not have food options. What we provide to our partners and clients is the ability to rapidly deploy their goods and their services without having to put up or to make massive investments up front in delivering those services. And that's why we were able to respond very quickly to COVID, for example. And that's why we were able to deploy our kitchens as well into new neighborhoods.
One of the many different characteristics that has struck me about the conversation around economic recovery during this pandemic compared to conversations that maybe were had 12, 14 years ago in the Great Recession or 20 years ago after the dot-com equity burst is the very intentional conversation around inclusion and diversity and equity. Certainly, arguably result immediately of the George Floyd killing, but I think more broadly, a real reckoning that the American society is having with race, particularly toward Black Americans. Teri, your bank, Black owned, has been in this community for a good long time. Your business that you mentioned doubling is the envy of a lot of people listening to you right now. You can see it on the chat functions. But I just want you to kind of share with us how you are hearing and experiencing that part of this economic recovery conversation. And I want to then broaden that out to the others here, because again, it strikes me as very intentional in a way that I haven't heard in prior efforts toward a rebound.
Yeah. So thank you, Tom, for that. So just for everyone, we are the largest Black-owned bank in the country. Many of you may remember us as People's, which was the Black-owned bank that we acquired over 20 years ago. So we've been in Miami for over 20 years. And it is actually, I'm from Florida, so it's actually home for me. But our focus has been on Black Lives Matter and on social justice for many, many years. And I have to say that it is wonderful, this moment, for that work and for our struggles to be recognized and better understood by the general population. You know, we've been sort of operating, you know, I don't know if the right word is in the dark, but we've been operating in a way to try to uplift our community and provide hope when, as a community, we have struggled. And it is nice today to really see people understand, you know, some of the struggles that we've been through. And the pandemic has brought that, you know, as it relates to healthcare, George Floyd as it relates to criminal justice. But we also see struggles financially. We see struggles. 40% of Black businesses have closed since the pandemic. So we see the struggle all the way around. We offered the Paycheck Protection Program in the second round. We had a lot of businesses that applied for PPP loans, a lot of Black businesses, and the majority of them we could not finance, largely because they lacked the documentation that was required for those loans. Mike Finney and I have talked about this, and I'm also with the Urban Initiative Task Force at the Beacon Council, and we've talked about this and the need for Black businesses to have more assistance, technical assistance on documentation. But it was very painful to see these businesses that needed the funds but did not meet the requirements of the SBA because of documentation requirements.
Teri, were these just like audited financials, for instance?
No, and in fact, the requirements were much less than what you would need for a traditional bank loan, but they still, so in some cases they were tax returns, in some cases they were payroll documents, in some cases They were organizational documents where companies were, 20, 30 years old and they couldn't find their organizational documents.
Right.
So it was a variety of documentation issues. None of them incredibly difficult, but, they were unavailable. And a lot of these businesses have been focusing on the business as opposed to the back office.
Yeah.
So that was, one of the things that we struggled with. And I guess the other thing that I would say is that, the struggles that we've had at the same time, we're very hopeful. We see tremendous opportunity. I mean, anytime there's a crisis, it creates opportunities. I'm sure the private equity folks can attest to that. But we're seeing a lot of new business startups, customers that are coming to us and that, are opening new businesses. And so we do see struggle, but we also see hope.
Miami has a long history and a strong history of business startup. It has a very difficult history of business scale up.
Yes.
Right. All the data shows that, Al. Like, everybody's nodding their head vigorously on that one. The Kauffman Foundation research has shown this time and time again. Melissa and Al and Philippe, you operate in these worlds in various different ways, as does Teri in a various different way. I'm wondering, as you look at a recovery from COVID, coupled in with the very intentional inclusion and equity and diversity, and the strong history and strong current characteristics of entrepreneurialism, but the difficulty in scale up. You're talking to the Beacon Council here, economic development. What needs to happen? What needs to change? What's the thinking that needs to be addressed? Policies that need to be prescribed? Give us a sense of you guys are on the ground, in the weeds. Melissa, we'll start with you, and then Al, and then Philippe. Kind of respond to that a little bit.
Sure. So just to go back for 1 second, though, I would say that for those of you that don't know, Baron Channer started a venture fund, but it was in partnership with Knight Foundation that launched in last December, and it's called Black Angels. And they are investing in African-American founders who have really great ideas. And they are off to the races prior to COVID and now with COVID. But one of their founding mottos is diversity is an advantage to be leveraged. And so I just wanted to share that for those of you who haven't heard about it yet, because it's here and they're growing and they are doing lots of demo nights with companies that they are finding. So I guess what I would say is that we are seeing, I guess how I would say is I'm seeing a lot of positivity in the market space all across the board. And I don't want to be Pollyanna about it because it's a lot of hard work, but I would say that if you look at what some of the work the Beacon Council is doing, I've been listened in on a lot of their meetings of late. They are focused on job creation, and they did a kind of a startup around Miami Tech Works, and they are looking at talent initiatives. If you look at some of the opportunities that have come out of this, I would say one place to look is the coding schools. The coding schools are doing really well right now. And what we've seen there is that the ones that were bricks and mortar have now realized they have larger platforms, because the larger platforms are to put everything online and they can attract more students. And if the students are from all over, their job opportunities grow. So originally Miami, was focused on bringing tech talent just to Miami, but it's also job creation. And so one of the ways to look at this is if you have the coding schools here that are growing and are something like a WinCode, and WinCode would be my example for this. The boot camps are now, they're able to place their students across the United States. It doesn't just have to be here. So they're actually growing to the point where they're now having folks reach out to them for acquisition purposes and roll-ups. Because this is now, instead of bricks and mortar, you have a growth opportunity there. So we're seeing something like that with that space, and they're doing an amazing job. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but.
Yeah, no, it's a wide-ranging question. I understand. It's a bad, Al Dotson, the counselor, will critique my question because it's not on point. It's much too open-ended, I'm sure, sir. But blue sky this, right? I mean, you have the opportunity to speak to the Beacon Council. You do frequently here, but this particular opportunity with this intersection of the recovery, inclusion, diversity, equity, Miami's strong entrepreneurial nature, but weaker scale-up ability.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go back to your original question when you pointed out that the focus on social justice has been intentional, and I'm going to add intense. And in this moment with COVID, people are seated, they're home, they're paying closer attention to what's going on around them. There are less distractions, and therein lies the opportunity. As I was looking through or scrolling through your participants list, I saw that you've got the president and CEO of the YWCA. You have the head of the national of the local urban league as a part of the participants. And I would say that the connectedness between business at this moment and our community organizations that are helping to prepare young people for job opportunities is a real opportunity for the Beacon Council and its members to expand. As you continue to look at the kinds of businesses that are looking at relocating to South Florida, that are looking at reinvesting and expanding in South Florida, making sure that those who are focused on preparing the workforce for future jobs are equally informed about those opportunities so they can begin creating the pipeline of opportunity. And I know that is first and foremost on Michael's mind and the Beacon Council, and throughout their entire network. The more of that can take place, the more opportunity we can provide in the 76,000 unemployed that you referenced earlier, and the disproportionate number of them who are African American will find their way to the jobs, whether they're scaled up or they're entrepreneurial in nature, or you're working as an employee in a corporate environment. But we have to make sure that we're connecting the dots through communication in the way in which this platform is providing us, so that people know where the opportunities will be and can prepare themselves for them.
Yeah, such an important point is the sharing of information in the marketplace for employees, for consumers, for residents, for business owners. Philippe, I'm wondering how you're hearing this and applying some of this with REEF Technologies.
Sure. Well, we are actually a company that proves that it is possible to be successful in South Florida and in Miami. I started REEF in 2013, and we now have 15,000 employees across the U.S. and Canada. So it's we like to think of ourselves as an example of what can be done in this environment. But our business is built around the concept that others can be successful if we lower the barriers and the difficulties in launching your business. When you're an entrepreneur, you need to be an expert in marketing and operations, and you need to have relationships with technology. I mean, there's so much that you have to do in order to have a successful business. And there are companies that you can partner with on the technology side. There are companies that you can partner with on the marketing side, on the legal side. One area where we felt that there was no such option was on the real estate side. And so our offering is geared towards lowering the barrier to entry for companies that provide real world goods and services. And that, I think, applies across the board to any organization out there. But to build on what Melissa was mentioning as well, is we see Miami as a great place for tech talent and tech opportunity. And we recently launched our studio organization to basically incubate in-house businesses and allow them to get the tools that they need in order to be successful.
So this is working with other business owners?
working with other business owners, with other startups. We're very involved in the hospitality and restaurant industry. And I think that's going to be a topic that comes up, but obviously that is an area that's been very, very affected by COVID. There are, but the trends were there before COVID. It just accelerated a lot of the developments that we see now, including the digitalization of the space. And I think that applies to really any type of business, not just restaurants. Yeah. It's just some happen to have gone through that already. So retail, for example, 10 years ago went through a massive reorganization based on the arrival of e-commerce. I think restaurants and hospitality is going through that transformation now. And the best that we can do is identify and acknowledge these trends and position ourselves in the community to support entrepreneurs in those spaces as they transform their business to adapt.
Dr. Mestre, I want to bring you back in the conversation as this part of diversity, equity, inclusion relates specifically to healthcare and access to healthcare. There is no doubt systemic failures of the access to healthcare for people of color. I presume you would agree with that analysis, and that's not mine. That comes from research in your field as you look at instances of health and longevity and whatnot. And we know also that people of color, particularly Black Americans, have suffered COVID at a far greater rate than the proportion in South Florida, as well as in the United States. So as a healthcare professional, doctor, how do you begin to think, how does your profession begin to work locally to address some of those systemic issues within access to healthcare for people of color, and particularly for Black Americans?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. The data has shown that there's inequalities when it comes to number one, who gets infected, and number two, the outcomes in terms of the patients, and both for African Americans and Hispanics. So part of it is that a lot of the African American community and the Hispanic community, given their jobs, are essential workers, and they don't have the capabilities of working from home. So get exposed as they go out into the office, to their essential job, and then bring back the infections that can infect the whole family. And we've seen that, and that is even shown in the pediatric data, which is also showing the inequalities between the minorities and white Americans. And what we're doing here as an organization, we're proud to say we've partnered with the Miami Dolphins, and they've donated $1 million to our organizations to address matters such as these, to address matters where we see that there's inequality, such as diabetes care, making sure that we have access to these individuals or to these patients, and making sure that we were able to treat them in a manner that addresses their problems and provide that preventative care to prevent them from having to come to the hospital when they're more ill, and provide that access to them. So that's a great partnership that we've done with Miami Dolphins, and that happened within the past 2 weeks. We're also partnering with Baptist Hospital and taking much more of their pediatric care, as the Children's Hospital Association has said regionalization of care is most important. So being able to provide that care to a greater number of our patients in the community in order to do so. In addition, within our organization, we've also all gone through diversity sessions where we're, number one is listening. So to sit down and listen to the members of our community and understand what is it that's there, and understand why these differences exist and what we can do to address them. And I think as we all become more cognizant of it, and when times are bad and we see the good that can come of it, I'm really excited to see how we're going to be able to address these and not forget them moving forward.
Are they sustainable, these efforts, do you think?
I think so. I think as we have to keep it on top of mind. It can't be something that we do in a period the next year. It has to be for the next 10 years. What's our 5-year, 10-year strategy in order to do this? Now, obviously, from a bigger perspective, that the economic differences within these communities also has to be addressed. Yeah. It's all the big picture. It's not isolated to healthcare. It all has to be taken a look at.
Yeah, indeed. And Terry Williams to that. And the idea of awareness, intention, action, and results, right? Like we're still on the front end of that curve, arguably, as a society.
Yes. Yes. So awareness has gone, skyrocketed, so that we've become much more aware. But action and results are the things that I believe are lagging and that we do need to continue to work on. One of the things that I would suggest of all the attendees is to look around your office, to look at your board, to look at your senior management team, and really take a close look at inclusion and whether or not there's representation of particularly Black Americans, executives, board members, but also Hispanic, and different types of women, sort of different diversity. And I think that is the only way that we really see lasting change, is that we do need to have a voice at the table. We do need to, and I'm not talking about compromising in terms of quality or, any of those things, because there's some really great people out there that can be helpful. So I think it's really focusing on what action we can take individually as well as collectively.
We've got about 10 or 11 minutes left, and I want to go around the room, the Zoom room as it exists here, and get the panelists' reactions to a couple of points. One is related to last night. How many watched the debate last night by a show of hands? Okay, everybody did. Well, I'm not going to ask you about the debate or politics. I'm going to ask you about civility. That's what I'm going to ask you about later on. But first, I want to ask, what does the Miami-Dade economy need from your fellow business leaders, from local, state, federal government partners in a way to build back in a more resilient way, a more economically resilient way, socially resilient, environmentally resilient? Maybe just kind of, I'm sure some of you have thought about this, and give us a sense of what some of those tools are that you think your colleagues need or should apply, and also what public policy makers ought to be thinking about. Teri, I'll start with you. You get the short straw.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that Miami needs more affordable housing. that will help tremendously in terms of being able to both attract and retain talent. Miami can be very expensive. So I would say just continued investment, because, we've invested a lot, but continued investment in affordable housing. I think second is that there does need to be more inclusion in terms of the economic growth, and to start looking at places like where I am, Liberty City, and Overtown. There's a lot of revitalization going on there, but to look at the some of the communities that haven't experienced the growth of like a Brickell, because there's a lot of talent here. There's a lot of land. There are a lot of buildings that could be repositioned. Industrial space is really one of the bright spots in the economy today, and there are opportunities to bring some of that industrial building here to places like Liberty City. So those are the two things I would say that would really be helpful for the economy going forward.
Al, how about from your perspective?
I'll just add, again, bringing back the initial discussion about schools, the business community, investing in our local public schools in a manner that goes beyond what we're currently doing. There are so many needs that are being identified as we go through this COVID moment that the private sector could be helpful in providing and advocating on a long-term basis for more resources in underserved communities, so that they can prepare themselves to take advantage of the economy that is coming.
Al, could you give us some specifics? It sounds like you have some specific ideas in mind.
I do. What's interesting, I'm gonna match the earlier question you asked about diversity and inclusion. It is critical that our community from K through 12 be educated about not only the contributions, not only the struggles of African Americans in our community and in our country, but the contributions that we have made, and the current impact of racism and slavery in the past on the current ability to actively participate in our economy. That's got to be a part of the curriculum, and we're teaching that. I know that goes in part to your civility comment, which is interesting. I wrote that word down, that what we need is more civility, common sense, and connectedness as a community. But I think that recognizing how your business, what you do, can specifically assist Alberto Carvalho and the school board achieve its objectives by simply asking the question, how can I help? I don't want to prescribe how every business can play a role, but every business has a unique position, a unique perspective, unique resources that they can bring to the table to help support our educational system.
Thanks, Al. I think you're reading off my notes about the civility question that we're going to end with here, Counselor. Melissa, how about for you, some ideas about your colleagues and partners in government to rebuild, rebound stronger and more resilient?
So I guess what I would say is that the Beacon Council is going to like this response here, because I think that the work that they have done over the last 6 months has been tremendous in regard to bringing connections together to look at how they can solve problems quickly with the local corporations that are here, the local entrepreneurs that are here, and they've done an incredible job. And I also know and believe they're underfunded and could do so much more if they had more resources. They know how to find the talent, they know how to find the doers in this community, they have access to them. And I think if there was more a larger staff, if there was more money that was put towards Beacon Council, I really believe we could put a lot more change going forward. So I don't think they knew I was going to give them a plug, but that is truly how I feel based on what I've seen in the work with Miami Tech Works and all the other pieces that they're trying to pull together for the community because they have the access to the leadership. So I would look at that. The other, to me, pillar in this community is Knight Foundation. I think the tech community would not be where it is without their support. They started it, they're in the middle of it still. We have a long ways to go, but we have done tremendous work in growing a tech community from nothing. When I moved back here this was about 8-9 years ago, there was nothing here. I mean, I think I found a Kiwanis Club event that said they were doing something on entrepreneurship, but they weren't. And so to see where we are today, based on how long it took New York to become where they are today, is tremendous. And so I'd love to see Knight Foundation continue with their work. I know they are. I'm on one of their committees that makes sure they're putting money to work in interesting ways. But I would say that these two organizations are on top of it, and I'd like to see them continue.
I want to try to make sure I have enough time for my civility question here. Philippe, how about for you? Building back, rebounding in a resilient fashion, what needs to be done?
Yes, we think there's a great opportunity in looking at our neighborhoods and not thinking in terms of going back to where they were before, but thinking in terms of where we can take them now. Now that people have had this taste for working from home, now that people have had this taste for rich neighborhoods, and so I think all around Miami we had outdoor dining. We've seen scenes we've seen New York that has now made permanent the outdoor dining for some restaurants, which has really revitalized some of these communities. And restaurants are really just one of the different mini businesses that can take advantage of these outdoor spaces. And so, on the REEF side, we're working closely with the DDA. We've had great partners with Commissioner Russell and Commissioner Reyes. But I think that that's an ongoing conversation, and we're very excited to see where that takes us.
Great. Doctor, how about from your perspective on the healthcare side, building back this economy? You've alluded to the health gap, the economic gap, a number of those things.
Yeah, from my perspective, obviously I'm biased towards children as a pediatrician here. but the importance of keeping kids in school, and because of the benefits not only from an education standpoint, but from a socialization and benefit of meals that they're getting at school, the childcare that's received at school. But what's most important is that we can only do that by following the rules, following the recommendations of the CDC in every industry and every business, the social distancing, the mask wearing. Because if our rates are going up in the city, unfortunately, it means kids have to stay at school, parents can't work, and it puts an undue stress on the family. So if we can keep the kids at school, I think from a business perspective, that affects us all economically. And as Superintendent Carvalho said, also affects the funding that our schools get.
Most directly. All right, here is the question that's going to be based upon the debate last night. I would use air quotes around debate if I could, but I'm not going to because it was officially called a debate. Regardless of your political persuasion, I do hope that we can agree that it was not a civil conversation or a civil debate, and it was not an exercise in democracy that Americans should be proud of. I hope we can agree with that. We've been talking about reimagining the Miami-Dade economy. Coming out of COVID-19 and the pandemic. How does the incivility, not only that we saw on display during the debate, but the incivility that I know each and every one of us has at least played witness to in some way, shape, or form, how does this incivility impact the recovery, do you think? Teri, you want to venture an opinion?
It's a very difficult question for me. You're right. It does have an impact, and I unfortunately can't look beyond the fact that the President of the United States could not disavow white supremacy. That has a huge impact on our community. So even though as a bank, we are nonpartisan, but that was a gut, punch in the gut. So I just don't know where to go from here.
Yeah, and the Beacon Council has always shown me great latitude as a moderator, and I know we never talk about politics, and I see Mike Finney smiling at me a little bit, and I didn't ask the question about politics. I really want to know just the tenor of incivility that I know we've all experienced and have witnessed. Hopefully we haven't played partner to, but just wondering what impact that has had on an economic recovery. Al, you live in the high stakes world of law. Tell us a little bit about how you think about that, maybe.
There's a few things that come to mind. First, COVID was a human condition. It affected human beings. And I think we learned during this moment that our ability to interact as human beings was impacted, and our ability to work as human beings was impacted. So you talk about a recovery coming out of this current normal. I refuse to call it the new normal. We have not yet hit the new normal yet. Right. If we don't recognize that our ability to interact in a civil manner and in a respectful manner is going to directly impact our economic future, then we really have missed all the lessons of the last few months. Because if I can't go to a restaurant because the waiter can't work, I can't leave my home because my nanny can't come, I can't actually work in my office or in the courtroom because some members of our community don't have the resources in order to leave their children at home and come to work even for essential services, then I have absolutely lost sight of what the lesson is. So I know civility is a word that covers a lot of things, including how we feel about each other and how our feelings are manifested through our actions. But I just suggest this, that if we don't learn anything else about what we witnessed last night, as a nation, we can't move forward without a ability to hear and listen to each other and respond to what we hear. And that is true also in our community. So that's where I think it impacts our ability to recover in a resilient way. If we're not listening to what the other person has to say, agree disagreeably, but recognize we have a common goal, and I'll use the one community, one goal statement that Michael started with. Because we are one community, we need to have a single goal, and we can only achieve that in a civil manner where we're listening to each other.
Yeah. Philippe, I'd like your thoughts, Melissa, and then we'll end with the doctor. Philippe, go ahead, sir.
Yes, I mean, I'll echo what Al said. I think we're in this together, and we see collaboration and partnerships as the way forward and the way out of it. From a business perspective, we plan for contingencies. I mean, that's how we can drive our business forward. But ultimately, I think we're on the REEF side. We're and overall I think we approach this as we're in this together.
Melissa, incivility and our economic rebound.
Well, from an incivility standpoint, I hope that Gen Z is going to do better and have a lot of faith that they will, based on everything they're seeing now. I think we're creating the next generation that's going to look a lot different in terms of people who are sitting back versus more actively engaged. I hope the voter turnout is strong. But I would say from a community standpoint, I think one of the things I learned this summer in terms of the project that I co-founded with Knight Foundation is that connections matter. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of folks in this community who work in a bubble, who don't necessarily get to meet people who can help them grow their businesses or change their thinking about the way they are thinking about their businesses. And so I'm hopeful that some of these new platforms that are spreading up that I'm starting to hear about will connect more people to share ideas that we won't have to travel for. We can have more and better online and learn for how they can continue to expand their relationships as well as their thinking, and it'll be easier access. So.
H.T. Smith, the civil rights leader, local leader, FIU law professor, told me, and he's told many people who've heard Professor Smith speak through the years, in Miami, we live in shared spaces, but separate lives. And I think that gets to that point of connection that you mentioned, Melissa. Doctor, we'll give you the last word here. And another opportunity to remind us to wear our masks as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And from that comes a place of empathy. And that's where I think it all starts. And with this COVID pandemic, it has brought us closer together and as one community as it has across the world. And if we start from a place of empathy where we realize that no judgments made and sit and listen to each other. And we've heard horrific stories of individuals that have gone through health issues, death in the family, and making sure that we start with that.
Well, thanks to all the panelists. Mike, thank you for the opportunity to host this conversation. I'm sorry I ran 4 minutes late, but your staff has been gracious as well, Mike. Always great. And thanks for the opportunity, folks.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, thanks, Tom, and thanks to all the panelists who took the time out of your busy schedules to share all this wisdom with all of our listeners. I have to say, I'm absolutely amazed. And I know that our team took some very copious notes around everything that you all had to offer, and it's much appreciated. You know, Melissa said something that obviously stuck with me, and that is, you know, how do we get more support for organizations like ours? And I'm actually not making a plea. The work that we do as a core part of our activities, we're fine. But it's those new and different things that represent gaps in our community that need to be filled, that we have to figure out how to fill. You know, it's a program like Community Ventures that's helping some of our most economically distressed individuals get access to living wage jobs. It's individuals who need to pivot and get upskilled or reskilled so they can take on new occupations that need to be supported. It's all the businesses that Teri Williams mentioned that don't have the back office in place. We have to be smart enough as a community to provide that kind of back office support and consultancy to those businesses so they have a chance to be successful and ideally then be able to do it on their own. So there's a lot of gaps in our community that still need to be filled. And our role is to really work in partnership with so many other organizations in the community to make that happen. We're happy to lead when appropriate. We're happy to follow when appropriate. It's all about one community, one goal. We appreciate everybody taking time out of your schedules to join us today. And please have a wonderful week.